Didn't think anything of it. And we're also fixed in our taxa. What's a tortoise? Tortoises haven't been known from Pinta for decades and decades. They've been carried out in the dozens by the California Academy of Sciences in early 1900s. They just been assumed to be extinct. He mentioned a year later at a cocktail party that he'd seen a tortoise on Pinta, and everybody's jaw dropped. But it was in fact Lonesome George. And Lonesome George was the last member of his species. He was taken off the island very soon thereafter. Multiple expeditions had gone to find more tortoises. No luck. And so Lonesome George whiled away his time in captivity for 4 decades, reminding everybody of, well, what impending extinction means. All manner of schemes were made to try and find other Pinta tortoises in collections around the world, trying to get him to mate with other tortoises that were reasonably closely related. Nothing came of it. He died 2012. There's a lot of discussion what to do then with this famous poster child for extinction. Some was take him back to his island and bury him with dignity. Some of the park managers, another tortoise, put it on the back of the pens and move away. But I just thought, why don't you taxidermy him in a dignified manner and help to retain this, the sort of symbology and his role in helping to continue to raise issues of conservation and extinction. So in some ways we regretted ever agreeing to this, but we went ahead nevertheless. But we, getting Lonesome George from the Galapagos to basically through the continent to New York City to the American Museum of Natural History, where he has since been taxidermied in magnificent form by George Dante here, and did a spectacular job of preparing this specimen. You would appreciate this here at this museum. The challenges of lifelike renditions of creatures, but he has become a very important exhibit, and with the intention all along is to have world-class taxidermy done and to return him to his back to Galapagos, where he'll continue to play this role. So he's currently in New Jersey in a warehouse as the preparation is made for a climate-controlled exhibit space for him in Galapagos. But this was to be the end of the story, with Lonesome George continuing on as a specimen, highlighting the realities of extinction. But very curiously, sort of bring all these pieces together, then it actually hasn't been the end of the story. These are the volcanoes on the northern end of Isabella Island. And these are some of the least known. This was the volcano that the pink iguana was just described from fairly recently, a massive pink lizard. You'd think that wouldn't escape the attentions of biologists until this millennium, but it had. But anyways, the last island, the volcano we really explored, because it's remote and it's difficult to get to. Very few people have spent much time there. And we still don't know how many tortoises there. We have raging arguments that there's 5,000, 12,000. There's a lot of tortoises out there, and they're of their own species, possibly 2. But there's an endemic tortoise there in large numbers. This area was never particularly heavily depredated by whalers, nor did it ever get the real incursion of goats. It's pretty much Galapagos as it's always been. Extremely active volcanically. In fact, it just erupted last year, which is exciting. Fortunately, it erupted in the one place it could erupt and not affect either tortoises or pink iguanas. It was miraculous. But anyway, in the course of these surveys in this very remote volcano, we were instantly struck by the sheer numbers of tortoises, but then the occurrence of these bizarrely shaped animals. So this is actually a fairly moist volcano, and so moist in volcanoes and environments tend to correspond with the more rounded shell types. And we kept encountering these animals in pockets, and mostly in these pockets down near the coast, in dry canyons, and with just stunning saddlebacking. And it just doesn't fit from a natural history perspective. So in the lab genotyping these animals, clearly there's a very abundant. Beckeye is the endemic lineage there. But we had interesting arguments initially. Gisela Coccone's lab, these alien genotypes. There's just within within Beckeye, there's coherence, there's variation, but then there's these utterly different genotypes there. And what were they doing? And the initial conclusion was a lot of contamination of PCR reactions. Something's gone terribly wrong, and Gisela kept at this and said, well, let's actually figure out what these tortoises really are, resequencing to rule out contamination. And it just so turns out that, yes, most of them are from the endemic lineage here, but there's actually a lot of tortoises from a lot of islands here, but there are two that are very significant, and these aren't just in small numbers, these are in fairly large numbers. One set of these alien tortoises turns out to be from Pinta Island, Lonesome George's Island, that is here. And the other set, in very large numbers, are completely surprise everybody, are from Floriana Island. So Darwin was about the last person to ever comment. About 15 years after he visited Floriana, that was the last known record of Floriana tortoises. It completely blew everybody away. We could sequence, based on abundant skeletal material in museums, obtain the genotypes of Floriana animals. But this very remote volcano seems to be full of its own endemic lineage and these other tortoises. None of them as yet are pure representatives of these. There seem to be, the best we have are some first generation hybrids. Some of them are young enough to make you think that there's got to be a purebred parent out there, but they're in considerable numbers. And so it gets back to human-mediated translocations, which I mentioned before. It's very strange to talk about pirates and warships and such in the contemporary conservation of giant tortoises, but in fact, we do know from reading the whalers' logs, and actually reading the journals of Captain Porter, for example, in the War of 1812, when US and British warships met near this volcano, they actually wrote very carefully that they had all been collecting tortoises. It wasn't just pirates and whalers, it was warships. Prior to engaging in the firefight, they threw all their tortoises overboard, mobilizing for the firefight. And they also recorded that they bobbed for 10 or 12 days in the sea. And, we do know, though, this Banks Bay was this resting place for whalers on their long voyages. They would meet, they would trade. My personal opinion is someone enterprising set up a tortoise trading business and went bankrupt and walked away from it, and the tortoises walked inland. But whatever the case, it's a long time ago, but in tortoise generation times, we don't really know what they are, but maybe 50, 70 years. They don't start breeding until they're 30 years old, but maybe, this isn't so long ago, it might be 3, 4 generations ago for tortoises. At any rate, there's a real trove now of these purportedly extinct species on the flanks of this very remote volcano, Volcan Wolf. Again, placed there by the very agents that destroyed them, but it creates interesting opportunities for us. So December 2014, we scoped out the site and just how practical would it be to go get these animals. They are giant tortoises. They're not easy to move around. It's this tough terrain. The volcano is erupting, but we did make a plan to basically search more methodically through this whole zone, and to take a big crew out there. So December 2015. We went out, November 2015, we went out and we had the benefit of a ship and a helicopter. We went out for 10 days and we put groups of folks into each of these sectors on this volcano and gave them some guidelines on morphology. And we'd also marked enough tortoises previously to keep their eyes out for these super special tortoises. And off they went. And they spent 10 days up there. It was kind of a nightmare to coordinate, but it all worked out in the end. With these, I believe there were 8 groups all working simultaneously. I was had the job of sitting and trying to deal with all the radio communications and the helicopter and just getting things coordinated. But when people found significant tortoises, they were picked up by helicopter in these cargo nets and brought back to the ship. And so these are all animals with significant morphology. They were either, or they were previously known based on the genotypes. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack with maybe 10,000 tortoises to look for those 100 of interest. But we brought these back, and here they are. They're remarkable, and they're in captivity as we speak. We've kept the males and the females apart until we figure out exactly the exact genetic composition of each individual, make a detailed sort of overall breeding plan. Just as we speak, these are the males. There's 40 or so tortoises now in captivity of these hybrids from these two extinct species. And we're in the middle now of the process of developing the plan for what to do next. And it's sort of exciting then to have this possibility of where for two species for which they've been basically written off and given up for hope for this incredible historical accident, to now be able to restore two species. So it's not without its critics. I'm surprised actually, I guess this is just another perspective in conservation biology. A lot of people say if these aren't pure animals, you can't put them back in the environment. You're contaminating. They're not pure lineages, they don't belong. We can't really get past that if all the selective breeding, and selectively breeding tortoises is like selectively breeding giant sequoias or something. It's just a long-term process. You can't just keep back crossing. We're taking the approach of developing a plan once we know the genetic identities of each of these animals to preferentially breed some individuals that have a higher quotient, if you will, of Pinta and Floriana genes. Those that have lower quotients, just to move them out to the islands immediately. We'll see how all this comes together, but I personally like the idea of, they've got a major infusion, sort of a head start in terms of the original alleles that define these populations. Get them out there, their environments are what their environments are, and let the whole evolutionary process with this huge jump start just reform them again and reshape them. It's sort of a compromise position. Some people don't like it, but it's sort of this zone you get in with conservation biology with lack of perfect solutions. But this is all moving ahead. I wish I could provide you more details on exactly the next steps, but they're all in captivity, awaiting their plan, and we shall see. So it's a long-term effort. It's always a little strange to be planning out things that are going to happen long after you're dead, but that is the case here. If we actually think through some population projections. This is sort of a map of where tortoises are in these dotted zones and where they once were based on a species distribution modeling exercise. And they probably once were and could be again. Maybe by 2200, with one step at a time, one population at a time, getting creatures back again that will get something to maybe 90% of historical numbers in this archipelago that is 95% strictly protected. So we shall see. It's ambitious, but it's been exciting, and there's no question that we wouldn't be where we were today without this interaction. I always say phylogenetics has set the blueprint for all of this. It just wouldn't have happened without these outside perspectives, but nor would it have happened without the annual investment of people and hardware and logistics and investment by the park. So it's been a nice interaction to try and rebuild this dynasty. So I will leave it at that and welcome any questions that you might have.